There is a rhythm to the downfall of nations, a pattern in history that has toppled three major governments in the last 250 years. And as the calendar turns toward 2025, a seemingly stable power is following that exact same sequence, stage by stage, grievance by grievance. It is as if the present is reading from a script written in blood and chaos centuries ago. In 1789, France stood as the dominant power in Europe, wealthy, cultured, advanced in every measure. Yet within 5 years, the monarchy was overthrown, the king was beheaded, and the country descended into the terror where 40,000 people were executed for political crimes. In 1917, Russia was a vast, seemingly unshakable empire. The Tsar ruled 180 million people, supported by one of the world's largest militaries. 8 months later, the entire regime had collapsed. The Tsar was executed. The Bolsheviks took power, and 20 million people would die in the civil war and purges that followed. In 1959, Cuba presented as a prosperous Caribbean nation. It drew American tourists, sustained a functioning economy, and glittered with casinos and investment. In 2 years, Fidel Castro overthrew the government, nationalized everything, and forged a communist dictatorship that would last for 60 years. 3 times, 3 revolutions, 3 moments when a system that appeared eternal collapsed into total chaos. And every time, the people in power never saw it coming. They believed in their own untouchability. They thought the peasants would never rise. They were certain the system was too strong to fail. They were wrong every single time. And today, every warning sign that preceded those 3 revolutions is clearly present in the core of the United States. The wealth inequality, the corrosive government corruption, the comprehensive loss of faith in institutions, the deep and escalating rage building just beneath the surface of the national life. The present is not simply heading toward the pattern, it is in stage 4. And history indicates that stages 5 and 6 follow with brutal speed. This is the story of how revolutions actually happen, why the governments they target never see them coming, and why the cold math of history suggests the cycle may be about to repeat itself. Before tracking the pattern's deadly march, one must understand the definition of a revolution itself. It is not merely a protest, a riot, or a simple political change. A revolution occurs when the existing order is completely destroyed and is replaced by something completely new, which is almost always something worse. Revolutions do not ignite because people are merely poor. Poverty is the oldest condition of mankind. Revolutions ignite when expectations exceed reality, when vast numbers of people believe they deserve better than what they have, when the gap between the entrenched elites and everyone else becomes so extreme that the fundamental social contract shatters. Most critically, the spark becomes a fire when the population loses all faith that the system can fix itself, that the government, the courts, the elections, or any established mechanism will address their grievances. When peaceful reform is rendered impossible, violent revolution becomes inevitable. This is not radical theory. These are the exact words of John F. Kennedy. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. History proves it, without exception. France, Russia, Cuba. 3 different centuries, 3 disparate ideologies, but the exact same sequence of 6 stages. Let us begin with the mother of all modern collapses, France, 1789. In the 1780s, France was the unchallenged center of European civilization. Paris was the cultural and philosophical capital of the world. French was the language of diplomacy and high culture. The monarchy, under King Louis XVI, had ruled France for 8 centuries. It appeared eternal, unshakable. Yet beneath the gold leaf facade, the rot was total. Stage 1. Extreme wealth inequality. The 27 million people of France were divided into 3 estates. The first estate, the clergy, owned 10% of the land and paid virtually no taxes. The second estate, the nobility, only about 400,000 people owned 25% of the land and paid almost no taxes at all. The third estate, everyone else, 26 million peasants, workers, and middle class, owned 65% of the land and paid the entire tax burden. Let the arithmetic settle in the mind. Less than 2% of the population was exempt from taxation, while 98% carried the load. It was not only taxes. The nobility held ancient privileges. They could hunt on the peasants' land, demand labor for road building, and exert feudal authority. They lived in palaces built on the nation's wealth, while the peasants starved. By 1788, a poor harvest caused bread prices to spike. Bread accounted for 88% of a peasant's budget. When its price doubled, people literally could not eat. But the nobility continued their five-course meals, their lavish, extravagant parties at Versailles. The gap was not just economic. It was a complete, arrogant disconnect from reality itself. Stage 2. Government corruption and incompetence. King Louis XVI was not malicious, but he was profoundly weak and indecisive. France was deeply bankrupt from fighting expensive wars, particularly the support of America during its revolution. The government owed billions, and Louis' solution was to borrow more, raise taxes on the peasants, and cut nothing. The nobility and clergy, the only classes with money, flatly refused to pay taxes. When Louis attempted even minor fiscal reform, the power brokers blocked him at every turn. The people with entrenched power preferred to see the country burn before they relinquished 1 franc of their privilege. By 1789, the crisis was absolute. The government could not pay its debts. The people could not afford food. In desperation, Louis called the Estates General, a representative assembly that had not met for 175 years. He believed it would legitimize new taxes. Instead, it became the spark. Stage 3. Middle class destroyed and radicalized. The Third Estate included not only peasants, but also the lawyers, the educated merchants, the doctors, the middle class. They demanded equal representation. They wanted 1 vote per person, not the 1 vote per estate system that granted the nobility and clergy a 2-to-1 advantage. Louis refused. So, on June 17, 1789, the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly. They locked themselves in a nearby tennis court, vowing not to leave until France had a constitution. This is the decisive moment. The educated middle class, the very people who should be the system's foundation of stability, turned irrevocably against it. When the lawyers and merchants stand up and declare the government illegitimate, revolution moves from possible to inevitable. On July 14, 1789, Parisians stormed the Bastille prison, the physical symbol of royal authority. They killed the guards and paraded their heads on pikes through the streets. The revolution had begun, and its escalation was blindingly fast. Stage 4. Loss of faith in institutions. The monarchy, the church, the courts, all lost their legitimacy instantly. The National Assembly abolished feudalism, seized church lands, and declared the rights of man. But for the radicals, it was never enough. The moderates could not stop the momentum. Stage 5. Revolutionary movement gains mass support. The Jacobins, led by the merciless Robespierre, demanded extreme measures. They called for the execution of the king, the total redistribution of wealth, and a purge of all enemies of the revolution. They gained mass popular support because the moderates who promised reform had failed to deliver economic stability. Food was still scarce. The people demanded blood. On January 21, 1793, King Louis XVI was publicly beheaded by guillotine. His wife, Marie Antoinette, followed in October. Then the terror began. Stage 6. Government overthrown. Chaos follows. From 1793 to 1794, the Committee of Public Safety, controlled by Robespierre, executed 40,000 people. Nobles, priests, political opponents, even fellow revolutionaries who were not radical enough. They called it purifying the revolution. It was industrial mass murder. The guillotine ran daily in Paris squares, a spectacle of public execution. The purge constantly expanded. First the aristocracy, then the moderate voices, then anyone merely accused of counter-revolutionary thought. There was no trial, no evidence, only accusation and death. Robespierre himself was finally executed by the very system of terror he created, because revolutions always devour their own children. By 1999, France was utterly exhausted. 10 years of chaos, economic collapse, and war on every frontier. Napoleon seized power in a coup, declaring himself emperor. The revolution that began with the cries of liberty, equality, fraternity, ended with a military dictatorship that would drag Europe into 15 years of continental war. The lesson of France is stark. Extreme inequality, multiplied by government incompetence,